Good evening, everybody. My name is Basil Smikle. I'm a professor of practice in the nonprofit management program and director of the program, and I'm welcoming you to our event. This is the first time we're doing something like this. We internally, after the election, had an idea to talk to our faculty members and try to figure out, given everybody's feelings after November, what was that, 5th, 2024, we were thinking after the election, how are students feeling? How are faculty feeling? How are our partners feeling? So we put a call together and recognized the importance of doing an event like this, bringing nonprofit leaders together, bringing community leaders together to talk about where we go, where are we, where we go, how do we move forward. So thank you so much for coming. Thanks, Lonnie and Vicky, who are here, for working on this, the events team, Andy, others for really making this happen, such short notice. We have a number of prospective students that are here. So thank you so much for staying. We got to talk a little earlier, and thank you so much for staying, and hope that you can connect to a lot of the leaders that are here. Again, this started because we wanted to make sure that we had this major conversation. And although I was able to kind of convene something with our team internally, I also got a call from my friend Dominique, who you'll hear from a little bit later, asking, why don't you do something? And I said, yeah, guess what? We will do it. And that's how we got here today. So you're going to hear from a lot of voices tonight. There are going to be a variety of voices and a variety of perspectives. It's not at all exhaustive. Clearly, there are a lot of other ways that we can look at how we move forward together as a nonprofit community. But I did want to convene a lot of my friends and people who I thought were experts in their space to be able to come in and talk about their impressions of where their organizations are, where we as a community are, again, how we move forward. There are a number of my current and former students here. Hey, y'all. Good to see you. Thank you. Thanks so much for coming. I said it wasn't going to be for a grade. It's not for a grade. Don't worry about it. It's attendance is not being taken. So thank you. But thank you so much for coming. After our program, and I'm going to try and keep this really tight because we have a lot of voices that we wanted to hear from today. We're going to try to keep the conversation tight. We're going to try and end on time, but we do have a reception afterwards. There's some beverages in the back. We have adult beverages too. At some point, we turn that on, and there are some there's some other food in the back. But more importantly, you're here because you care about what we do here at Columbia. You are here because you care about what your friends and family members and colleagues do in any organization that they're a part of. Because what I'd like to say is that we are serving oftentimes the most disadvantaged among us. We're oftentimes serving the folks who don't have a voice of their own. And I think it's important for us to convene here today to talk about how we continue in that effort. So let's just get right into it. The first person I'd like to invite, it's one of the first people I actually called. Thank you so much. Phoebe Boyer, who's the president and CEO of the Children's Aid Society and an alum of the Columbia Business School. Next, I want to bring up another wonderful friend of mine, Arva Rice. Arva is the president and CEO of the New York Urban League. And then Dominique Jones, who I mentioned earlier, the executive director of Global Kids. Dominique. Thank you all so much for being here. Let's just start with you, Phoebe. Tell us a little bit about your organization. And again, given where we are right now, some of the challenges that you may see going forward.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to be here. And Basil, thank you for bringing us all together. We actually have been talking about spending some time together. So it is nice to be here. I run the Children's Aid Society. We are one of New York City's oldest and longest active organizations. We're 170 years old. And our overall goal is to make sure that children living in poverty have access to a super high quality education, that they are developing socially and emotionally, that they're strong and healthy, and that they have a strong and stable family. We work on a 0 to college continuum. We're direct service providers, so we are providing the services. But we also know that the systems in which we work don't always work for our kids. So we do a lot of policy work as well, trying to change that. And some of the things that are coming at us, they're actually a little bit unpredictable. They fall in the categories of as extreme as will we have Head Start funding? And will we be able to operate our early childhood programs? To what is actually going to be the demand on our health clinics when it comes to child illnesses that we actually haven't seen because we have effective vaccines. Will that be undermined? Will our pregnancy prevention work be undermined? We really don't know how far reaching. I mean, and there's an entire thing to say about education. So we're bracing, but not trying to overcalibrate. There are obviously local issues that are also playing out for those of us in the nonprofit sector. It's a very fragile time. I sometimes describe the nonprofit sector as the unseen infrastructure of this city and of this country. And we're fragile. We're like bridges that have not had a lot of maintenance, and people are only going to notice when we're gone.
Arva, tell us about what you do at the New York Urban League, and you're the first woman. You're not the first woman to run the New York Urban League in its history.
I'm the second.
You're the second.
Yes.
In how long?
I'm the first.
You're the first. In 170 years?
In 170 years.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
In a child-serving organization.
You're the second in.
I'm a second in 105 years, and I very rarely am on in a conversation where there's an organization that's older than I am. So that's pretty impressive. And Phoebe, thank you so much for that analogy of nonprofits serving as the silent infrastructure. That just really touched me because I think it really truly is who we are. As Basil mentioned, I have the incredible privilege of serving as the president and CEO of the New York Urban League. The New York Urban League is one of 92 urban leagues around the country that work in the areas of education, employment, housing, and healthcare, and unapologetically work with African Americans, helping them to provide equality and access. And urban leagues were started, as I just mentioned, ours is 105 years old. The national organization was started 110 years old, 110 years ago. And it was created for those individuals who were moving from the South, picking cotton, picking oranges and tobacco, and moving into big cities, whether it was Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, and trying to figure out how to navigate those big cities. In the South, it was very clear. There was Jim Crow. It let you know you can go here, but you can't go there. But when you got to the North, the rules were not as clear. And so urban leagues helped individuals to navigate those difficult waters, and we're doing the same thing now. And so our work primarily with the New York Urban League is with education, employment, and advocacy. And so we work with New Yorkers, helping them to go to college, helping them to get employment, and also around advocacy issues. And when you think about the issues that are most of concern to us, as Phoebe mentioned, it is very unknown. We do know that there's something called Project 2025. We don't know if it's going to be implemented on day one or not implemented at all, right? So we have to prepare for the extreme and everything in between that. But I do know that after having an amazing Thanksgiving dinner made by my mom, that I woke up the next day and Walmart had made a very public decision that they were going to step back from their DEI efforts. And that was stunning. And it was particularly stunning for a place like the Urban League because we have served on their advocacy and advisory committee for years. And so our national president was not aware that they were making that step. And unfortunately, when corporate
Didn't tell anybody.
It didn't tell anybody. Did not tell anyone. And so unfortunately, when corporations make moves like that and they're part of business roundtables, others follow. And so I do know, I'm not sure of what the future brings, but I do know that our DEI efforts are certainly at risk, and that somehow DEI has been equated with Black. And so all the things that touch and impact and help and assist African Americans will be a target going forward.
And Dominique Jones, Global Kids, tell us about the work that you're doing and some of the things that you're thinking about now.
Well, first, I want to just say thank you, Basil, for bringing us together. And also thank you for putting this panel together. I think right after the election, the three of us were together at Somos, kind of trying to figure out what was going to happen. And I think that one of the things that you'll come to know and understand in the not-for-profit community, that we are actually aligned and engaged with one another and supportive of one another. And I've found that these two women especially have been supportive of me and my journey as a not-for-profit leader. And of course, Basil, you've always been supportive. So I just want to thank you for having us here today. I run a nonprofit in New York City that's not quite 170 years old or 105 years old. It's actually 35 years this year. Right? No, no, no. But I will say that it was a niche program that focused on global education of young people. And the reality is that, the young people were really learning to develop advocacy skills and understand international affairs and foreign relations. And I think that those are all great things, but like many non-for-profits that we need to talk about, we're nimble and we try to evolve with the times. And so over the last 10 years, we have really become an organization that is working to advance educational equity. We both serve here in New York City and Washington, D.C. In New York City, we're in over 20 schools, serving as a community school provider, as well as an out-of-school time provider. So what you would know as after school, but in community schools, we also are looking at how do we support the whole child, the whole family, so that we can address the non-academic barriers to academic success. And what I would say is that in this moment now, more than ever, these services are essential. And in this time now, more than ever, nonprofits, like you said, Phoebe, we're the silent infrastructure, but I would also say that we're battle tested here. Many of us have gone through hurricanes, economic downturns, the pandemic, and we've actually built a number of skills, tools, resources, relationships that are going to actually help us navigate what we are considering an uncertain future. And so I really implore us to, and I'll say this, and Arva was with me when I was kind of like, oh, I don't know what we're going to do. But then I kind of snapped back because I began to think about all of the experiences that we have developed, experiences that we have had that have helped us to develop key skills to move through this moment. And so I'm cautiously optimistic, but I definitely know that we will be working here in New York City and DC and other places to ensure that we don't have to worry about Head Start or to figure out strategies around the pushing away of DEI. So really, really excited about the opportunity, and our hope is that we can move through it all together.
Thank you. And I, wanted to come back to Phoebe on that point, which, you run a massive organization. There's so many ways, and you touched on this before, so many ways that, a new administration and all that brings touches your organization. So how do you keep all of that together? Right? How do you keep all of that together? And what kind of support and help that you have? And how do you see that as an opportunity, given where we are? Or are there opportunities that you may not have had before that you may have in this moment?
Yeah. How do I do it? I don't know. I mean, I do know. I have this incredible team. To give you a sense of just the size, I have over 2,000 people who work for Children's Aid. We have 40 different locations in New York City with over 100 different programs, all interwoven together. We have a budget that's about $190 million. And we rely on government funding and private funding from both foundations and from individuals. And I think sometimes we say, oh, it's so complex. How do you do it? It's actually some of that complexity is our secret strength. I don't know what thread is going to be pulled in terms of direct funding. What I do know is what kids and families need. And I also know that we were started when there was no safety net in this city. Children's Aid is credited with creating much of the safety net that we take for granted. school nurses, and a whole host of things. And so I often step back. I often say to our team, we've been through 34 elections. We will be through this too. We have been through the Spanish flu, and we have been through COVID. And what I think at the heart of nonprofits and what makes this time maybe more of an opportunity is we were all created to make change, to make the world a better place. And so the things that I really worry about are the existential threats, like will they take away our tax exempt status, which is very real. Those things are a little more daunting at times, but mostly it's about an incredibly committed group of people who know what we need to do. And as I said at the beginning, some of the work we do is to fix systems that are not working for our kids and families. So it's also, any good crisis is a moment to re-envision things. And so, maybe I don't need 50 different contracts to do the same work in 50 different locations. Maybe I could have one and we could all be much more efficient. So I am trying, I think, to help all of us. And by the way, we all take our moments where we go down into the rabbit hole and then we have to come back up. But that's also the nature of nonprofits. Nonprofits are essential to our civil society in this country. It's what sets the United States apart, and New York in particular. But we are too unseen. We also can work in better ways together. So I think there are many ways to navigate through this.
And I want to touch on this point about you mentioned taking your tax exempt status away. I wrote something about HR 9495, which gives the Treasury Department, or would give the Treasury Department, more authority to have this sort of unfettered ability to snatch a tax exempt status away. The House supported it, but it has not yet gone to the Senate, I believe. So that may or may not happen, but it's been something that's been brewing for several months. And you said that you are unapologetically Black, I guess, in person and in your work. Yeah, right. And so how does that, for both of you, so how does that make you think about the work that you do and the kind of concern that you might have for what comes down the pike?
This is actually the third conversation that I've had today with either nonprofit or civic leaders talking about the impact of the election. And so we were speaking about the idea of nonprofits being at risk of losing their nonprofit status, the IRS being weaponized, so that it's not only just about your organization, but maybe you individually, somebody being able to come after you in those ways. Whether it's, New Yorkers love to protest, right? So being able to have a drone that's looking out and looking at all the protesters and being able to identify people in those ways. And so it's a time of unnerving. When you think about the nonprofit organizations that might be at the top of the list, I think that that'll probably be the NCLU, who might be right at the top, right? Planned Parenthood might be high up there, NAACP, right? And then the Urban League, right? So I think that we might be one of those organizations that might be a target. And so we have to move and work in those ways. But as Phoebe mentioned, we've been here, right? We've been here, we've been through this fight, we've been through this battle. The work that we're doing right now, our ancestors could not even have imagined us to be in these places and spaces as we are, as African Americans, as women, as people of color, as individuals whose parents may not have achieved these various areas. So it is a time of great concern, but we know that we'll get through this. And there's opportunities for us to come together in ways in which we have not in the past, and to be able to build coalition, and also to strike out and to develop efficiencies and other ways that we can move forward.
I'll ask the same question, Dominic, but also on this point about coalition building. So how do you see this as an opportunity to build coalitions?
Well, I definitely see it as the opportunity to build coalition. I think we've had a lot of practice. Now is showtime. And I think we have to really begin to think about what are our shared values, what are our shared outcomes, and really build the infrastructure, if it's not there, to bring us all together to move in the same direction. I don't think it's by accident that these organizations are here, because we have this incredible multi-service organization that does a range of things in support of the family and communities, this amazing advocacy organization that is doing work, and then our organization that's focused in education specifically. And so there are shared outcomes, there's common language. We just now need to spend the time to make stuff happen. I think that one of the things that we struggle with in the past has been, well, I can't partner with you because I won't get the money, or I can't, I don't want to, I have to have my outcomes be my outcomes and not yours. Now, there's no time for that kind of conversation, because we don't even know what money is on the table. We don't even know what the expectations are. So I think that we really are going to have to let go of the things that keep us apart and really begin to embrace all the things that will help bind us together.
Can I I would want somebody to join us or this conversation. Anna Oliveira, I know you are here. Hey, Anna, hi. She is the president and CEO of the New York Women's Foundation. No, thank you so much for coming and joining us. So tell us a little bit about the work that you do at the foundation, and given what you've heard today, it's same questions to you. What is some of the concerns you have going forward?
First of all, thank you so much for having me, and I am so honored to be sitting here with these incredible colleagues and partners. And I want to thank you, Basil, for doing intentionally, I think, philanthropy should always follow. So I'm very happy to be following the leadership of our leaders. So I have the incredible privilege of working at the New York Women's Foundation. We are a very local foundation. We are a public foundation. That means we are not created by a corporation or a family or some other uber wealthy entity that put millions or billions of dollars and then we fund from that. It means that we fundraise and we fund. The idea is that collective giving is more powerful for not-for-profits than it is just one gift at a time. Not-for-profits can rely on larger gifts. Not-for-profits can rely on multiple years support. And they don't have to produce 60 reports to 60 donors. They can produce one report and we handle donors. So the foundation, we do believe that problems and solutions live in the same place, and that folk that are living and creating those solutions on a daily basis need to be at the center of any architecture of support, of change. I wanted to comment that, the fact that the sector of the not-for-profit sector that my colleagues are representing, foundations are part of the not-for-profit sector, but it tells you how different that can be, right? Because foundations have an enormous amount of privilege. First of all, we are not able to be first responders because I consider the not-for-profit sector in our communities first responders. They respond first and they respond always. And that kind of, talent, commitment, you were right. The city wouldn't exist without a not-for-profit sector. The city just wouldn't exist. The foundation, our job is to bring resources, is to follow. When I say follow, it's not to tell people what to do, but it's to listen to them and to their communities of what they need, and fund with what we call general operating support, which means what to do. And we are removed. Foundations are always removed. And, we all know that having financial resources doesn't mean having wisdom. Doesn't mean having many other things either, but it certainly doesn't mean having wisdom. So we like to stay on our lane very clearly. That's the foundation. What do we see as some of the threats? So, we've been talking a little bit about the fact that the foundations in general, even very large foundations, we don't have the capacity to replace government funding, the dimension of government funding. By the way, government funding is our taxes. Just wanted to remind us all that government funding is not some kind of benevolence of others. It's government funding needs to be where the taxpayers are, and that's in our communities, right? So I wanted to say that on behalf of my colleagues here because it's earned, it's owed back. Philanthropic dollars are also. Philanthropy itself is a product of incredible inequality, and it's in that sense has a moral, spiritual corruption that compromise, I would say, that many of us work to undo. Many of us work to intentionally shift that power imbalance and put the money back. So it's a mini redistribution process, right? What do we see ahead? I think that I'm following and learning from the brilliance of my colleagues here. And I would say that it will be important for us because so much is, yes, we read Project 2025 and we see a certain speed of movement. And we can probably project a few very disturbing and probably really hurtful actions to take place very quickly. And we need to prepare for that the best we can. But I think that we need to come together more often in a reality like that. That the strategy together, you talked about collaboration and collective action. Yes, recalibration, some things are predictable, some things are not. I also think that we're not looking at a monolithic set of actions. We are looking at complex social actors with their own contradictions, with their own limitations, and we have to pay attention. We have to pay attention. But at the foundation, we see ourselves convening our grantees more, listening to our grantees more. What do you need now? We see ourselves creating a pot of money for fast responses, for nimble responses, for what we can. It's not like a grant that you apply for a year. Stability needs to be maintained, but rapid response also needs to be there. And, I was briefly mentioned in New York, I just wanted to acknowledge that we have kind of a trifecta effect of trying to really see where there'll be elected officials movements to protect our communities. And we don't know that. We need to be watching.
I have one question for you, and I want to bring up a friend of mine who is here, and I'd love to hear from him. One of the things that some have been talking about is a chilling effect. Do you expect, and it's for all of you, do you expect a chilling effect with respect to donations or other kind of activity to you or in the giving itself?
It has already been happening, right? Let's be real that it has already been happening. It's this internalization of fear. Right? Is this, so many brilliant people have talked about the colonization of our minds, right? And with that, the colonization of our spirits. And that is up to us. That is something that we have the mechanisms more than anyone else because we're rooted in our traditions. And the more we are rooted, Arvo, you talked about our ancestors, the more we're rooted in our traditions, the more we can deal with that chilling effect and melt it. For that, we also need to witness each other. We need to come together. We need to understand that is a belief that we create in our heads. that we are not significant, that we should not act, that something terrible is going to happen. So yes, there's a chilling effect. And, there's a melting of that chill effect too, because just as fear is very contagious, so is hope. And I wanted to say, you mentioned there are so many students here. I wanted to say that, every solidarity act matters. Every volunteer opportunity matters. Every thinking together matters. And that we need the strength of the not-for-profit sector is fragile from a financial point of view, but is the strongest sector in its spirit, in its devotion, in its commitment. It is the sector that says, against the grain, we are here. So I wanted to say that because it's a time to dig deep into that.
Thank you. Everybody. You could please.
Well, just in response to the chilling effect, I think that yes, there is a chilling, everything that Anna said. But I also think that we have to make sure that government and other actors are in place to keep that safety net for our not-for-profits. I don't know, many of you may know that right now, many human resources organizations, many not-for-profits in this city are waiting to get paid. And so the dollars that we are able to raise are really actually helping to service debt to cover the costs related to payroll and all the other operational costs. And so we get the issues around why government may be slow to reimburse, but we've got to do the things to move government to make that happen, because we know that there are going to be foundations that are going to rethink, just like the Walmarts rethink the DEI. So we have to make sure that your dollars are actively engaged in this work, because one of the things that I want us to really understand about not-for-profits is that we're adds significantly to the economy of the country, of this city. And, the folks that are in the communities that we serve, we hire and they bring those dollars back to those communities. We help to address some of the issues that would be even more costs, create more costs in our community. So the fact that we are feeling it from philanthropy and having the slow pace of payment in government is creating a crisis. And now we're facing this uncertain future. We have to work collaboratively to be able to make that happen. And, I wanted to say we respect our government partners, but we want to make sure that everyone respects the work that we're doing.
And Phoebe and others, do you feel that do you feel siloed at all, or is there a lot of collaboration?
Well, I think we've talked about this a little bit. There's sometimes collaboration in name. There's certainly coalitions from an advocacy standpoint, but when we think about what we're facing, the fact is, at least for a period of time, there will probably be fewer resources and greater needs. And the reality is we are going to have to work differently. So this to me is the place where there's an opportunity. I was on a call actually on Monday with a bunch of individuals thinking about mental health services for young people, and really thinking about how do we deploy those resources better? How do we leverage those who have Article 31 clinics and can actually bill for those services versus those that are raising private funds? How do we actually think about this work profoundly differently? And I'll tell you, even within our organization, we have some silos, right? You have funding streams and professional development, right? The actual professional development of teachers is different from a nurse. The adults don't know how to work together all the time. And our funding sources then reinforce that by not giving flexibility. So we actually have to teach the adults how to do the work differently and to think in partnership, so that when we also are a community school leader, we work in partnership with the leadership of a school, but we have health clinics and early childhood programs and after school programs. That's about the adults doing things differently. And I think there's tremendous potential in that. And that was the case before some of the threats that we're facing. I do also want to come back to, we have a certain amount of power. The nonprofit sector is the third largest employer in the United States. That's a tremendous amount of economic power that we have to think through. And I do think we were talking about the nonprofit sector being this unseen infrastructure. It is. Maybe the opportunity is in a crisis, people start to see it and appreciate it and come to the table more in more authentic ways. People are scared. Foundations are scared. Nonprofits are scared. Individuals and families are scared. There is also tremendous hope, and that's the place where we have to hold on to and move forward. And it's going to require, frankly, everybody in this room leaning in, right? It's all within our capacity to lean in and help on these issues.
So incredibly well said. The answer to the question about collaboration is yes, absolutely. We can collaborate in different ways. One of the things that I put a micro example of that. I was going back and forth with one of my board members. He was insistent that we organize a bus to go to Pennsylvania around the election. And I thought there were a lot of other organizations were organizing buses. So I said, does the Urban League really need to organize a bus in addition to all the other buses that need to go to Pennsylvania? Yes, we need to organize this bus. And so drove me crazy trying to organize these buses, but we finally got to the morning of, and I was standing there in the front of the bus, and I realized that we had people that were there representing sororities and fraternities. We had people there representing churches. We had people that were there from our young professionals, individuals that are older. Basically, we had a coalition of individuals on that bus that the Urban League hadn't seen in a really long time. And so this moment creates an opportunity for us to come together, I think, in very different ways. And we need to just build on that opportunity. I started out the conversation talking about DEI. In diversity, we talk about the fact that diversity is being the ability to invite everybody to the dance, right? But that equity and inclusion is getting everybody to actually dance, right, when they get there. And that's about finding the song that works, right? Finding out the song, but getting the women to be willing to go out and not sweat their hair out, being able to find that right set of cues that's going to get everybody onto the dance floor. And unfortunately, in this time, in this moment, this song that's playing is the one that needs to get us all out to the dance floor and us all working together.
I'll just say the last thing about collaboration is you have to do it. I think that part of the challenge is that we don't do it. I've had the good fortune of collaborating with ARVA, and I think that we just said, there's no money, but we got to make it happen. I've had the good fortune of collaborating with United Community Schools. Mm-hmm. There's no money, but we just got to make it happen. And I think that if we really have that mindset to go ahead and just do it, I think that will also break some of that adult behavior. I have programs in schools with other CBOs, and I will tell you the adult behavior, the kids want to hang out and they want to do everything, but the adults are like, no, because it's not on my schedule, because when DYCD comes to look at it, it won't work. We got to get past that. It's not serving us, but it's not serving kids. It's not serving community. It's not serving family. And so, what I want us to see in this moment is that we have to act, we have to do in order for us to really fight back on what we may perceive may happen. If they see us just in alignment, I think that they'll be a little scared of us.
Mm-hmm. Philanthropy has much to improve in collaboration. Just want to say, you can see the smiles. Funders can work better together. So if we work better together, it's easier for, first of all, fund collaborations, right? But also in philanthropy, act together with each other. There's a little bit of ego in foundations, like my mission this, my mission that. I'm just owning that. For me and generously for all of us. But I do think that there are some good examples. And I do think that conversation is happening in philanthropy. So I feel very hopeful about that, making it easier to access dollars, rather than going to 5, 6, 7 foundations, going to one centralized table, so to speak, where you can get bigger support and easier support. But that is something that we can improve. I just wanted to say one other thing that I think this time requires, and I've been doing that, is getting my learning of history, my learning of other places, of other traditions, of struggles, of other historical moments in which other countries, communities have gone through difficult things. In many ways, you know, I'm an immigrant here. I didn't grow up here. In many ways, the United States has an enormous amount of privilege in that sense. And we know from our enormous diasporas, from our enormous, you know, deep roots, that the opportunities that we're talking about, in many ways, is an opportunity to actually get closer to how other realities responded to very hostile and unfavorable moments. We are not the first. Unfortunately, we will not be the last. But because it's the, you know, the belly of the beast thing, you know, we forget that there is so much more in the world, so many other traditions and lessons and inspirations and resiliences and ability to shape shift, but keep the spirit, the core, and the goals, you know? So I just wanted to remind that to us.
Now, I want to ask everybody one last question, and then I want to hear from a couple of other voices. But we have a lot of prospective nonprofit management students, a lot of folks that work in nonprofit management, and some teachers college students. We're all nice. So words to encourage us moving forward.
One of the things when the world feels upside down and that things are going in totally the wrong direction, the agency that one has in a nonprofit is unlike anything else. And that is the reason to lean in, get in here, get the skills, and join forces. It's the most talented, caring group of people you will ever encounter. And you yourself, I mean, when I think back to COVID and people feeling like, you know, helpless in that moment, we had to act. Nobody had been through it before, so you just had to figure it out. But it's exhausting. Don't want anybody to think that this is not hard and exhausting work, but it is also, the level of agency is totally empowering, even in your most frustrating, helpless moments. And that is really unique about this city and this country for all of our problems.
Hard to add to that. Working in the nonprofit sector is amazing. And being able to lead the New York Urban League has been the hardest, most challenging, most disparaging, most wonderful, enriching moments of my life. And I can't imagine, I really truly believe it's a gift to be able to do this work. And so if you are given an opportunity to identify something in the world that you a wrong that you see and find some way to make it right, I just encourage you all to do that. I'll leave you with one final word, and that's my father, who's gone on to glory. When I called him and I told him that I had gotten the job at the New York Urban League, he had worked in the construction industry his whole life and was one of those people who moved from the South to the North for a better life and wanted to send all of his kids to college. And so he was more proud of me when I got this job at the Urban League than even when I graduated from college. And he said to me, "Ava, I'm so proud of you. Please get some better clothing."
Well, I would just echo all that was said before me. I definitely think us coming together, the agency, you know, all the things that you talked about, Arva, in just terms of the idea of your values and really that driving you and leading you. What I would just say is that in this work, it has been the opportunity in my career to innovate and try new things and develop a sense of fearlessness in the face of very limited resources and very limited support sometimes. You know, I think many folks really get hesitant because you have bureaucracies and other things around you. But in the not-for-profit space, sometimes those barriers are kind of released, and you're actually in a position to try new things and take the risks that really are going to have a positive effect on those that you serve, and ultimately on the communities, for good. So I would just say keep that in mind, and I think that you'll have some inspiration as you take on these roles.
Ditto, 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 ditto. And the following. It's about purpose. Look, there's gazillion sectors we can work in and jobs, but you will not find anyone, any sector where you can go to work every day and come out of there with a sense of purpose and meaning for every single minute of your day. That is something that is, what is that? Those ads, priceless. That is, right? So we have two bottom lines. We're mini businesses. That's the budget. That's the government not paying. That's the fickleness of philanthropy, all those things. But that is never, that is a must do, but that is never the reason. The reason is the purpose. And where do you find in the world that you can go to work, get paid, be with people of like-mindedness, purpose? And when you finish your day, as you know, Arva said, Phoebe said, Dominique said, Michael said, you're tired. But you're tired no matter what job we are doing. The question is, think about life, think about purpose, think about the return. For me personally, has been a sector that has had more grace than any other sector, more humanity than any other sector. We are not perfect by any means, but we are willing and devoted to get better. And that is really important. The last things, we need you. So please, yes, do it.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for coming. For those that came in a little later that don't know me, I'm Basil Smikle. I'm the professor of practice and director of the MS in Nonprofit Management program here at Columbia School of Professional Studies. Thank you all again for coming and being with us for the entirety of this town hall, if you will, respecting nonprofits and where we go from here. We have some beverages in the back, adult beverages, but we're not really sure. We're not opening them right now, so that means you got to stay for just a little while longer. And I know that I'm the only one in between you and that, so we're gonna get it rolling. Right now, I'd love to bring up. He's the president and CEO of the New York Immigration Coalition, Murad Awadeh. Thank you. Thank you so much. I've been waiting to have this conversation for a while, man. Immigration, or let's even say it differently, the demonization of immigrants was such a hallmark of the last year plus. I'm a child of immigrants, so I'm watching and listening to everything very carefully. Tell us about the work you do in your organization and how, you know, given what's been happening, how things have been discussed in the media, how that's affected your work.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Murad Awad. I'm the president and CEO of the New York Immigration Coalition. It is a pleasure to be here with you all. I think the work that we have been doing as an advocacy, policy, and coordinating services organization, believe it or not, has not changed for the past 37 years. It's only gotten more difficult, but the work continues to be. And I think the demonization and the scapegoating of every wave of immigration has happened in the history of this country. This time, I think it burns a little bit more because the demonization, scapegoating is coming from a leader of a city like New York, which has been built by every wave of immigration that has come here, from our roads to our bridges to our skyscrapers to our local economies, our food, every aspect of our life. And I think that we're in this precipice of a moment where we're dealing with people who don't really value humanity. And I think that that's what this comes. If you're looking for a root cause, there's been so much dehumanization that started before Trump, that got accelerated during Trump's first administration, and then sort of became normalized after. And we see that in every other aspect of life today. So I think the work has been hard, but it's been also incredibly gratifying at the same time, because while we're able to not win everything, we have been able to win and really deliver material conditional changes for our communities. And that's the goal of the work that we do, is really trying to make everyday New Yorkers' lives easier, even if it's by a little bit.
Talk a little bit about the wins, because one of the things that we've been hearing is the potential for mass deportations. How does an organization like yours sort of try to stop that or deal with that? Given the work that you've already done and those wins, like how do you even address that?
It's a great question, and I probably should have reviewed the questions, but we're slightly busy, but I really wanted to be here. Everything from restoring the right to drive for every New Yorker, regardless of immigration status, which is a huge win. And I think that people tend to sleep on it, because now people have actual state identification. Yes, we have the New York City ID, but also you have to remember that the state of New York is a huge state with 62 counties. New York City only consists of 5 of them. And we had an enormous amount of people who literally, for simply driving, because there is no other form of transportation, were getting pulled over and turned over to ICE and Border Patrol. So being able to restore people's right to drive in the state of New York and get a driver's license has saved tens of thousands of people from being separated from their families. And this threat of mass deportation has been the threat that he ran on before. And some of the wins that we actually are really proud of is ensuring that New York City continues to be a sanctuary city, regardless of what anyone says today. I think I like to remind people in government in New York City, there's 2 equal branches of government. And the first one is, yes, the mayor. The second is the New York City Council. One is run by adults. The other is run by someone who constantly has temper tantrums. And regardless of what they may feel or what their ulterior motives are, local law is local law. We are a democracy here, and regardless of who you are, you cannot undo local law as the mayor. So passing a slew of sanctuary policies from 2017 till today has been a major accomplishment for our city. And the city has reaped the benefits of it. And the state has reaped the benefits of it by the tune of $63 billion. That is how much our communities pay in state taxes every single year. Do you think we get our fair share? We don't. So that's why the work we do is really critical, to make sure we're getting the investments that our communities desperately need. We've had major wins on immigration legal services. The city currently invests $104 million in immigration legal services. We need more, though. The state invests $65 million. We need $150 this year. And we need to go further. So while we have had major wins, we need to go even further, because the attacks are going to come stronger. And the way that we can best protect our communities is strengthening our local and state policies here in New York.
And there has been, because you talked about the mayor and governor, there's been all this conversation about mayors and governors being pressured to get rid of the sanctuary city status. Like, so, I mean, is part of your work going to have to be, going to the mayor, going to the governor, and finding ways to shore up that the sanctuary city status? Or do you do it? Are you doing it in other cities and states?
So the New York Immigration Coalition has been part of a national network of similar coalitions that do the same work that we do here in New York, in other states. We are part of the Fair Immigration Reform Movement, which is a coalition of coalition-like organizations like the New York Immigration Coalition. And we operate as trying to do bring community groups together, organizations together, to pave the path for how communities can continue not just to survive, but thrive. And I think people tend to get a little bit like, what are you fighting for this thing when it has nothing to do with your community? Our mission is to serve all New Yorkers, to ensure that all New Yorkers, regardless if they've been here 30 days or 30 years, have the ability not just to survive, but to thrive and have the tools to do that. So with the work that we're doing, I think that regardless of who's in office, because people come and go, some people get indicted, some people don't. We have the thing that continues to drive us forward is not who's in office or who has the power. It's about building power for our communities. And that is what is going to continue to drive us into the future. So I think what the city and the state have reaped will continue to be, and we will continue to push forward. The threats will continue to come. They did that last time. And thankfully, we have an amazing attorney general by the name of Letitia James, who fought back last time and will fight again this time. This threat of defunding us, they did it before when we restored the right to driver's licenses. She sued them in court. We got her, they took away a couple of our like perks like TSA pre-check and stuff like that, but we got it back. And New York City and New York State actually contribute a lot more money to the federal government than we actually get back. So there's a real important moment right now that we've been pushing the state to do their research and make sure that we, I think, receive about $86 billion from the federal government. We give a ton more money back to it. So we should be in a position as a state of New York to defend our communities, defend the programs that are really critical to our city, our state, our New Yorkers who are relying on these social safety net programs, which are the first that are going to get cut, to make sure that we have not just the rhetoric of people talking about mass deportation or how they're going to cooperate or not. You can't cooperate or collude with ICE without a judicial warrant as per law right now in the city of New York. We have a state executive order that also prohibits it. So I think we are in a position where, yes, we want to strengthen the laws. We want to do better. And we're going to do it either in partnership or we're going to drag each other kicking and screaming to get it done.
All right. Now, we have a lot of students here in the nonprofit management program, but you also have people that literally just care about the issue. What are some of the opportunities that you see going forward, even with all of the language and the rhetoric and the demonization? Do you see opportunities going forward for people that want to be involved with either your specific work or in general in supporting the immigrant community?
Yes, there's an enormous amount of opportunities for people to actually get engaged in the work. What makes New York, New York City, what makes New York State, what makes this country is the people. And what drives this country forward, this city forward, and our state forward is, fortunately, the nonprofit sector. And I'm not saying that because I'm part of it. I'm saying it because that's the truth. The people who are often furthest marginalized and furthest vulnerable often are relying on these institutions to get to a place where they can become as self-sufficient as possible. And imagine being part of that, regardless of what field you go into. Imagine if your job takes you into case management and being a social worker at a DV organization, or if you go into immigration and you're actually helping manage immigration legal cases. You're changing people's lives. We don't get into this work for the money. If you're looking for money, this might not be the area for you. We do pay living wages. We have a bunch of jobs that are available on our website, nyc.org. But I do think that there is an enormity of opportunities, and this is probably the most fulfilling industry you can ever get into. If you are someone who's looking for a shared sense of purpose to work in an institution that is going to help change people's lives, and I mean by tiny ways and big ways, this is a sector you want to be in. This isn't a rat race. This is about collectively working together to uplift as many people as possible and as quickly as possible. And while the attacks may seem grand, we've been here before. We literally have been here 4 years ago. But they're armed with more tools, and so are we. So I think in this moment, this is not a moment to be scared. I know that that's like the easiest thing to do, and like that's normal to feel fear in this moment. But at the same time, we know who we are. And the number one thing I often tell people is our safety is in our solidarity. And solidarity is not just saying, I stand in solidarity with you. It's an action. You have to do something to be in solidarity. So I'm a proponent of people joining not just nonprofit organizations, but specifically social justice organizations. ones that are really recommitting to the communities that they come from. Like I grew up in a low-income community, one of 7 kids in Sunset Park in the 80s and 90s.
Anybody here from Sunset Park? Brooklyn?
Y'all missing out.
All right.
And if it weren't for the social services and the nonprofit organizations in Sunset Park at that time, family health centers, right? Which you're probably like, a family health center? Yes, family health center. Ensure that myself and my family, which it was a mixed status family, had the supports that we needed to actually not just survive, but to thrive, get education supports from our schools. Like the reason why a lot of us are standing where we are today is not simply because we got lucky. It was because people in this industry made sure that we were going to be good. And then becoming politically awoken by walking into a random environmental justice organization at a young age, and then them being like, we want to train you to be an organizer. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? And then that becoming my political home for over 20 years. So this is a moment for you all to see what you want the future to look like, and then you having a hand in shaping it to become that.
A great way to end our conversation, brother. Thank you so very much. All right. The last part of our conversation, I want to invite my colleagues, our faculty, Kim McCall, Chandani Puni, Erwin DeLeon, to come and talk. As they're coming up, I have a friend from Democracy Prep Public Schools. I know she had a couple of words she wanted to bring. So come on up, Anita. Say hello.
Thank you, Basil, for being in the space today. I'm very grateful to join you all on this Wednesday evening. Yesterday felt like a Wednesday. Today is actually Wednesday. Time is flying, right? But I am Deputy Chief of Staff at Democracy Prep Public Schools yeah, see, I got some supporters here. We're based in Harlem. We have schools in Harlem, the Bronx, Las Vegas, and San Antonio, 17 campuses, thousands of students, right? So the fun fact about like all of this conversation is when we talk about like mobilizing power and mobilizing our abilities to do the work, it really is, and I mean it in the best way, in combination with everything that was already said, it really is the people and the core values that you establish. When you're working as an emerging leader or you're an established leader, how often are you reevaluating the values at your organization? And when you made those values, are those values still succinct today? And are your people that you work with and that they work for, are they connected to the mission that you're claiming that's best for the organization today? So we need to think about how we evaluate and reassess our values in current context, but I also think it's important to think about the people that it impacts. We make a lot of assumptions, and when we diagnose problems, we think that this is the solution because we work in silos and our small leadership team, and we say, I like this, and this is what we stand for. You get a couple of friends, and then you just go. Did you test it with a couple of people to see what is their actual feedback, and how are we going to iterate on that process over time? So at Democracy Prep, for example, we service students, low-income backgrounds, we welcome all lottery system. I'm a product of that system. And the way that this becomes full circle is the organization that I work for now, I grew up in. So Democracy Prep nurtured me. I am a product of Democracy Prep. So me standing here today as Deputy Chief of Staff was a combination of values of the importance of bringing voice and choice to low-income communities and empowering them to see themselves in different leaders in the world, whatever that means for you. Democracy Prep focuses on civic responsibility. We also focus on global citizenship, right? Because the values at Democracy Prep is we want every scholar who goes to our student to be able to say that they've seen the world to some extent or engaged in community efforts and also understand the power of their voice. So during the election cycle, way back when, even before, we were like, your vote, our future. If you can't vote, are you talking to folks who are qualified to vote so that they can vote? If you're not allowed to vote, what are you doing to mobilize your voice to encourage and get the word out there? That starts as early as elementary school. So now you're building that skill from elementary, middle, and high school. And now you have a lot of people who feel very confident and equipped to challenge anything that comes our way, even if it's unprecedented and even if it's unexpected, because we know we can mobilize and move forward. So you're never going to have a situation that's 100% perfect. They're going to be the result that you anticipated. But at the end of the day, your values matter, how you mobilize your people matter, and how you implement feedback that people tell you shows that you care and that you're willing to be flexible in moving the needle in order to ensure that we're all aligned for whatever the future goal is. Keep that in mind and keep that effectiveness, because it's more than just you, it's a combination of efforts.
I definitely want this brother to introduce himself, and then we'll talk to our faculty members. Gary Jenkins, a former commissioner of the Department of Social Services. Tell where you are now, brother.
I'm currently the Chief Administrative Officer at Urban Pathways, which is a nonprofit organization that help individuals who are homeless, put them into permanent and supportive housing. So proud to be there. I was with the city for 36 years. I retired. We talked a lot about government tonight. Government is not bad. I'm going to say that because I started out as a frontline staff member. I'm the youngest of 8 kids. Was in receipt of public assistance, my family, and that organization really helped my family. And that caseworker who had that conversation with me and said, Gary, you can change your reality. You can be the difference in your family. And I was the first one to graduate from college, the first one to graduate with my to earn my master's degree. So government helped my family. And I stayed in government for 36 years because I wanted to give back to the agency, which is Department of Social Services, that helped me and helped my family. But now I'm on the other side. And we do wonderful, amazing work. It's eye-opening because when I was in government, I said, nonprofits are our partners. They do the work. The people in the community trust them. They don't trust government as much. So the work that you all are doing or you will do, walk in there with your eyes open, have a lot of pride in what you're doing, knowing that you are changing individuals, families, their lives. It changed mine. So the work that you're going to do or you are doing, again, stay focused. And thank you so much, Basil, for having me tonight.
Brother Jenkins is a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. Just so you know, it is the Founders Day for my beloved fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Just throw that out there. But we have our incredible faculty with us this evening. You are doing the work. Just introduce yourselves and the work that you focus on, and a sense of what you've heard today and what that may mean for our students in our program going forward.
Well, that's a tough act.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, thanks so much for having us here tonight, Basil. And I want to say thank you to all of you for your interest in being in the sector. And in my 30 years of doing this work, never has the need been more urgent or more vital. So we do need you, and I know we'll get to that part as well. But my name is Kim McCall, and I currently run an organization called Children in Conflict. We work in humanitarian aid. We protect, educate, and advocate for kids living in conflict zones. We believe that every child deserves to live a life free from the horrors of war, that every child deserves the chance to just be a kid. Seems so basic and simple, right? This year we'll serve over 1 million children across 15 regions. We are incredibly busy. The need is growing. We do everything from run helplines in Afghanistan for kids to report child marriage and labor abuses. We help rehabilitate child soldiers in the DRC. We run an ed tech platform in Ukraine and in Uganda. So we've got all sorts of different innovative ways that we meet kids exactly where they are. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Next. Hi, everyone. My name is Chandani Punya. I teach innovation and human-centered design with SBS. I'm a little bit late, so I've missed some things because I was just wrapping up my class over at SIPA, where I also teach innovation and human-centered design. I've had a 15+ years career in working for nonprofits, international NGOs. I kind of say I've worn every hat at an institution. So I used to work on Wall Street, actually. And then I decided I wanted to do more impactful work. Had 2 years working at Merrill Lynch, and then decided to work with nonprofits. So worked at a lot of nonprofits, Asia Society, City Harvest, if those names are familiar. Went on to work with World Food Program, most recently the International Rescue Committee, where I led innovation work in Latin America. It is very hard to work with people. So a lot of what I heard towards the end of, working on aligning our different beliefs, but really we're all so much woven together in the things that we care about. We all want to live good lives. And despite what your voting is or what your values are, we can all agree that most of us want to live well. So a lot of what I teach is how do we do that? How do we do that at the workplace? How do we bridge differences? It is not easy work. I left my job at the IRC in Latin America about a year ago because I was frankly really burnt out from watching children and people suffer injustice. So it is not easy work. I have immense respect for people who've been in nonprofits consistently year after year for 20 plus years. And so how does this all tie into the program? I bring in a lot of my best practices, as a woman of color in this sector also. I grew up in India. Very different context, but then I go to countries where, I don't really, I hope people are scratching their heads and saying, why is she here? And, how does that my identity fit into that space? And kind of really teaching that to my students and facilitating their thinking. So it's really a lot of hard skill and experience sharing, looking beyond the textbooks and looking beyond the research papers. And I really kind of dive into to my practice to share that with our students.
Erwin.
Hard act to follow. My name's Erwin De Leon, and I am a full-time faculty member in the nonprofit management program. So delighted to serve with Basil and the team. And I also serve as the inaugural Chief Diversity Officer for School of Professional Studies. So, in light of that, thank you, but we'll get to it at some point, right? So inaugural, because I was one in 2019. Half of Columbia colleges didn't have a diversity officer initiative. It took the murder of George Floyd to suddenly have people like myself. So I think we'll talk more about that. But just in terms of background, so I'm an immigrant myself. I'm originally from the Philippines. And trust me, I lived under a dictatorship. We're fine. I think that's one thing I want to stress, because what I heard from the speakers, what's very hopeful is I understand the fear, I understand the anxiety, but basta, enough, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm so energized right now after what I heard. It's time to get moving. And then in terms of background, we don't have enough time. I'm the oldest one in this bunch, but
I didn't say that.
I'm older than you. But I've worked in the for-profit, nonprofit, and research areas. So, and I'm very fortunate because I'm able to bring that all as a professor here at Columbia.
Well, let's just start on that point about DEI, because we heard a lot over the last year and change that DEI means didn't earn it. Arva mentioned earlier about Walmart and pulling back on their program. So how do you think about DEI programs now, given everything that we've heard? What are the things that concern you, and what are the opportunities you think we have going forward?
Big topic.
Big
I mean,
topic.
I actually teach a DEI class, and I always start, it's like, what do you mean by DEI? Right? So that's number one. And number two, it's very different. We usually think of the US context, which is very different from the global context. So that said, in the US context, clearly, right, since affirmative action was taken away last June and all the attacks on anti-DEI and all that, that's real. However, it's the narrative that we're buying into. I actually spoke with an executive of General Mills just a couple of days ago. And, sure, we've all heard about Walmart. We've all heard about, because that sells. But there are just as many organizations, for profits, that actually are sticking to the work. So I think that's number one, right? Understanding, I'm sorry, DEI is not dead. Maybe it's starting to diminish in the United States, but go elsewhere in the world, you can't help it. We're becoming a more diverse global, world. And then I think I'll end with this, is that there are really three ways to approach this, right? As an organization, whether it's your for-profit or nonprofit, you can totally capitulate, right? And reveal just how committed you are, to DEI, and we're seeing that with for-profits. And as I tell my students, don't be surprised because that's what they're there for, to make money. If DEI, ESG, or any of this good stuff doesn't sell, they're not going to do it, right? And then there's the other end where you are courageous and you stand up. You stand up and no, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to stick to the title DEI. And there's a lot in the middle where, you know, leaders and organizations choose, okay, maybe we'll change it to inclusion or what have you, which I get. I understand that. As managers and leaders, you'll have to figure out what's best for your organization, what's best for the community, right? So no judgment there. But my last thing is, some people have heard me say this, I'm queasy about just saying, let's use inclusion. Because by dropping the D, the diversity, we're forgetting, at least here in the US, how this all started. The civil rights movement, affirmative action, it's about access to Black and Brown communities. I'm sorry, there's no two ways about this. So for me personally, I hope we don't drop the D, but I understand. But let's not forget by suddenly, sure, of course, I'm all for inclusion for everyone, but let us not forget what we're doing here. And finally, it's all tied into me. Why am I doing this? Because it's about social justice. DI is just one manifestation of that.
Yeah, thank you. Johnny, one of the things that, one of the reasons I really wanted to hear from you today as well was because when we were on that call right after the election, we talked about how should we be thinking about this in our program. You sent it to students and how they may have been feeling. So I would love in your comments to talk about, you know, where you think our students are, some of the ways that we might want to engage them and protect them going forward, and maybe if there's still those fears and concerns, how do we address that?
Thank you. So I was actually a School of International and Public Affairs graduate student the last time we were in this place. And I remember my own feelings when we heard the election result. I was disappointed, really disappointed, but had hope. And when we had the election results recently, I did a survey actually with my class and to get a pulse on how my students are feeling. And, you know, we did like a word cloud bubble, if you've seen those. And the words that jumped out were disappointment, but the one that was the loudest one was fear. And for me, that was really disheartening to see because I also felt really fearful that day. I teach human-centered design, and I am in the trade of teaching everyone to be expansive thinkers and having optimistic mindsets. So if my students, if their minds are screaming fear, well, when we are fearful, we cannot think from a place of abundance. When we are fearful, we are fatigued, we can't come together. And the speaker earlier had mentioned about solidarity, but I think the emotion I was getting from the room was everybody wanted to isolate, including myself. I think that has changed because time has passed. But I think as educators and just motivators in the community, and I think in some ways, even whether we realize it or not, we are impacting people around us. So I think it's up to us to really think about who do I want to be and how I want to encourage and motivate people. But I think for me, the practice or I'm all about tangible skills. So I teach a lot of human-centered design, which is focused on problem identification, personas, what people want, attitudes. But if we are becoming divided as humans and our preferences, can we at least agree on some visions of the future, which taps into futures thinking and strategic foresight? And regardless of how you vote and where you live, I think we can agree that whether you are blue state or red state, families living in those regions will be equally impacted in very emotional and real ways when there's the effects of climate change. You might not want to agree on climate change, and perhaps we don't have to, but we can agree on the pain points that are caused by changing weather. So I think a lot of what I'm teaching my students now is, you know, do the difficult job of aligning on language that doesn't divide, but is inclusive and diverse, right? You have to kind of take the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility lens into everything we do. And I think, in my years here, I moved to the US in 2002. I've observed as an immigrant in this country, the discourse kind of being more and more politicized. Unfortunately, like social and societal issues have been politicized. And so I think it's time to take those back into society and use language that doesn't divide but includes everyone. And I think sometimes that's really hard to do. I think even my students, they struggle with, oh gosh, it's Thanksgiving and somebody in our family is going to say something problematic. I don't know how to talk about it. So I think a lot of that is, okay, let's actually try to have a conversation and talk. Let's think about the future. Let's try to bridge differences. Let's not use exclusionary language. I think the voting is indicative of, or the results, the way they've worked out, have also showed us like a classism happening, right? Depending on where the votes have gone. And so we have to kind of think about all of this and be more expansive in our thinking. But I think a little bit of grieving period, a little bit of feeling fear is fine. But then we've got to take action. I think a few of us have said that tonight.
Yeah, no, I think almost everyone I know has a family member they do not talk to now, including me. So yeah, it's been tough on the fit at those relationships, right? Kim, in the work that you're doing, what are some of the challenges you see ahead and some of the opportunities that you see ahead?
I do think I have a little bit of an interesting perspective from the international development space and how, the things that are keeping me up at night right now. A lot of my colleagues have already said it. There's some economic uncertainty as funders and donors think about what the next few years look like. I would say something perhaps unique to the work I do. We've got some operational risks that we're thinking about as we see around the world more authoritarian regimes coming into power. There could be more and more restrictions on how we access different areas and deliver our services. And so that's really difficult to navigate with our team members. And of course, safeguarding is our utmost priority. So that's a complex thing to think about. We also are thinking about some of these, bills and legislation and our tax exempt status and how it's going to, what might happen. And I've had some good conversations promising with my friends at Save the Children and at International Rescue Committee. And the word on the street is that we're probably safe. It's not going to pass the Senate, at least the bill that's impacting those working in countries with terrorist operations. But it's something that we have to think about in terms of our IRS 501c3 status here. So that's also keeping me up at night as well. And I'm really worried about mental health and staff morale and taking care of my team. And I think all of us are entering this new phase with fewer resources and more demand. And we're still at kind of pre-COVID levels of staffing. And so how are we going to embrace that and support our team members? And it's so great to think about how you're centering humans and leaders in your work. And Erwin, of course, with the DEI work that you're doing, which I'll just mention, looks a little different in my area as well. There's a big movement toward decolonizing philanthropy and international development. And what that looks like is it probably doesn't make sense for a bunch of New Yorkers sitting in a fancy office in Times Square to be making decisions about what types of programs are going to help young moms in rural Malawi move out of poverty. So making sure that we're localizing leadership and really lifting up local partners. And so I do see that as a big opportunity as we think about more innovation and collaboration moving forward, and just agility. I'm always saying in class, like, we're going to adapt. No, we'll move this there. And if we're nothing, if not agile in this sector. And so I think that that's a really important competency to continue to develop in your work. And I'll add that.
Just a couple of things and we'll get you out of here. You all are faculty members. So talk a little bit, let's start with Erwin and come back here. What are you teaching and what are you looking at in the future? Give us a call to action, some marching orders going forward.
Okay, so right now I'm teaching the Leadership and Management of Nonprofits course, the capstone class. I also help develop and teach the Social Impact and Performance Measurement course. and the DEI course and anything that Basil and Lonnie tells me to teach, no, which is my pleasure. But I think there's a lot of opportunity. We're talking about just always constantly improving our courses, right? And again, for my students here, you heard me earlier, fill out the evaluation form because we actually listen. But seriously, we teach this, right? Basic management. You get feedback, you improve. And I started here as a deputy director of the program. Actually, I've been in Colombia now close to 8 years. So, and I can assure you, this program has just gotten better and better. And so that's number one. Like, I look forward to that. But also the openness working now with Basil about, okay, what is needed out there? I think definitely a lot, what we heard. We just need to work together more on advocacy, more on collaboration, more than anything else. And I think one thing which is hard to really teach, put in a syllabus and say we're teaching nonprofit management is about values, right? But that's one thing, it's about values and centering yourself on your personal and organizational values and the mission. So weaving that into our courses, I think that's what we all do.
Oh, thank you, John.
Maybe I'll build on that. So I teach human-centered design and design thinking and innovation, which are really big, isolating words, actually. So we spend a lot of time on learning language to make this whole process more inclusive. But just to pick up on this idea of values, what I teach is, well, whose values really matter and how do you prioritize them? So what are some really tangible ways in which we take our beliefs and ideas and make them work? And you'll be surprised to know when you think about innovation, you think, oh, big ideas. We spend 80% of the time thinking about reframing problems and really thinking of who are we letting decide how a problem is framed, because that affects how we solve it. And you'll be surprised to, well, maybe not surprised to know this, but I say this at my School of International Public Affairs. In that building, you get a good grade on your paper when you cite like 50 citations or more. And, then you look at who came up with all this academic research. And it's very skewed. I mean, not a lot of, when I was teaching innovation, I'm like, why can't I find a book by a brown woman who's talking about innovation? There's something wrong here. And so, in my class, I have now 19 students. They're all women. And one of their assignment was, I don't want you to cite anybody else. I want you to cite your thinking. What do you think? So I talk about things like, I think the Sustainable Development Goals are a wonderful framework, but they're absent. I tend to get pretty personal in my classes. So I'm 40 years old. I'm single. I just went through my social egg freezing, it's called. And I had my doctor come and talk to my students in class. And we said, where does women's reproductive assets and our reproductive rights fit into the SDG bucket? There is no bucket for it. There's no bucket for postpartum depression. So I kind of spend a lot of time with my students in creating buckets for problems and how we talk about problems, because unless we all agree that that's good, we shouldn't probably move into the solution space. So that's a little bit what I do.
Oh, thank you. Well,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Can I take your class next semester? That
Yes.
sounds so great. I love it. So much to learn. So I have been teaching a variety of different classes. Right now, I'm teaching nonprofit scope and impact. I see lots of familiar faces in here. I've taught many different communications classes, from strategies and how to implement great practices within your organization to being a great speaker or writer. And then lots of capstone projects, which are such a fun kind of consulting sprint in doing a real world project. So really runs the gamut. But like my colleagues, I have been in this work for 30 years. I've worked across a variety of different causes and different positions as well, and like to bring those real world experiences into the classroom. So really try to bring the sector to life for everyone, and I think challenge one another to make it applicable, to make it practical. The work is so hard, and I think the more you can try it on while you're here in this environment, the better. So excited that we're doing that work.
Well, I'm really glad to be able to work with all of you. I got to work with Lonnie and Vicky in putting this together, our events team in putting this together. We got through a lot tonight. We heard a lot of voices. And what is so wonderful for me and for all of us to see is that you're still here. It's the wine. I get it. Well, it's fine. But just pretend it's us. But you know, one of the things that I'd love to be able to do is let's come back next year and have a conversation, see where we are. And for all of you that are in the nonprofit space already, our students need you and would love your input. And most of all, they'd love to work for you, you know, after they graduate. So just, you know, let us know when you have, the career folks, did I do that right? There you go. They'd love to work for you after they graduate, so they'll reach out to you before they graduate. So drop us a line and let us know when you have some openings. And if you don't, just let us know when our students can come and talk to you and pick your brain about the sector. You can certainly do that with us as faculty members. If you have some work that needs to be done, we have capstone classes and they're willing to come and do the work, do some of that work. So again, thank you all for coming. We'll see you back here next year to finish this conversation. There's the refreshments in the back. And if you are a prospective student, I hope you like what you heard tonight. And I hope this encourages you to apply. God bless and thank you all for coming. Thank you.